That was...
You good? All right, great. Can I push it away now? Okay, we are moving on to the consent agenda, which is approval of the minutes from our last regular meeting, which was held October 23rd, 2012. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye. Oh, you want to poll the vote or?
No.
No? Then aye.
Quit trying to be in charge, Rick.
I just can't help it.
Okay, we're going to move on to the director's report.
Most of the information on here is financial. First thing I'll note is that the transfer station has been open 126 days since our last meeting. We were closed for 3 holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. So I haven't had a chance to present to you the item 3.1, which is the year-end report for 2012, so I have just a couple things that I want to say about that. If you look at the front page, go down to liabilities and equity. One of the things that will change in the final report is that it still shows a post-closure liability of $2,650,636 because we were able to petition for that reduction of 5 years. That number will be dropped to $2,277,801, so that's a reduction of $372,835. And I'm going to ask you to turn the page and look at the bottom line, literally the bottom line. At the end of last fiscal year, there was a $78,984 surplus of revenue over expenses. And even though this is an unaudited statement from the county auditor, and it is subject to change, it shows that last fiscal year we were able to recover from the structural deficit that we had, and we're starting to build up our cash reserves. That includes, if you go to the third page and just go up to other charges, there's a depreciation expense listed there, $101,364. And I wanted to just comment on that in the way that that affects our budget in the sense that we budget this amount of money, and therefore we have to fund that amount of money, so we have to have enough money to balance the whole budget, but that money is not spent. So essentially we're budgeting it to save it. So at the end of the year, that money which was budgeted and not spent helps to add to the cash balance, which has increased over the last year to the point that at the end of this last fiscal year was $433,000, and as of December, if you look at the December report later, we're up to $510,000. The reason it's good that we have cash available is, as you'll hear later, we have damage at the landfill occasionally. Sometimes we have to pull into reserve to do that kind of repair because they're unanticipated, and yet we still have to do it. There's the annual need to budget for depreciation, but more importantly, that if something has to be repaired in the near or far future, that we start building up cash reserve to be able to make those repairs or replacements. That's the point of depreciation, so that cash flow is increasing. If I can have you flip back to the first page again, under liabilities and fund equity, there's $150,000 designated for lease debt service. The county auditor made that entry there because the iBank requires that we have $150,000 in cash reserves in case for some reason the transfer station payment is not made. But in last year's audit, and I think the previous year's audit, we were told, and I believe that we need to make arrangements, that we actually need to take that $150,000 cash and transfer it into a reserve fund that the county has access to. So the county auditor doesn't see it that way, but our external auditor is still saying that that's what we should do.
And the reason would be?
The county is the primary party to the financing, and so the agreement that the county has with the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank requires that they have that cash reserve, that they're holding it in case for example, we don't make the payments to them, then they have the money.
But it would be a restricted fund?
It's absolutely, it's
Okay.
restricted for that use only. And if it's not spent, then go to the last payment and... Well, I'm not sure that there's strong feelings about that, but when the issue came up last year, this was what we did. And it seems like there may be a need in this fiscal year to transfer that money. So that would reduce our cash if we have to do that, but again, a reason to start building that up and having that restricted reserve set aside. There's one other thing that I want to mention that will be described more thoroughly, I think, in the final audit, is that there will be a one-time correction to recognize accumulated bad debt from bad checks that have bounced that we've had to buy back, and we're in the process of working with the county auditor and the external auditor to document that and come up with a number so that we can, so that would be a one-time charge off last year's.
Does the DA's office still have the bad check program? No?
Well, I don't know. We have multiple steps that we go through to collect the checks.
Right.
Including
There used
first-
to just be a program funded by the DA's office, so if you wrote a bad check and were a habitual offender and/or it was a big check,
Yeah.
and you were unable to pay,
I will
they would
check
go
into that.
after
I
'em.
can tell you there are two steps that we
It's
go.
probably not funded anymore.
There are two steps that we go through. One is that when we get the bounce check, we have to buy it back from the county. Then we go to the customer and we try to get them to reimburse us for the cost, because it's money that was already deposited, to make that square with the county. If we fail to collect on those, then we refer a batch of checks at a time over to the county, and the county treasurer's office has a collection program. And every time that happens, there's a markup. So when we have to deal with the bounce check, there's a $25 markup. I think when we forward it to the county for their collection, there's another $35 markup. So it's better for everybody if we can make it right. Any questions about that? I just want to move on to the December auditor report. The timing's always tight on getting the most up-to-date. This again, 3.4 is the report that we get from the county auditor. You can see our cash balance on the top of that is $510,000 as of the end of December. So this is a pretty good tool for looking at where we're at mid-year. If you go to the third page, as of mid-year, we're $35,000 to the positive as far as the bottom line. And I just today got the January report from them, so it's not in your agenda. I can give it to you, but I can give it to you next month. But the trend is continuing. The cash balance in January was $522,000, so we're building up our reserves, and again, we have multiple needs for that.
And board members, did you have any questions on item 3.2 or 3.3 before he moved on?
I did not.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, please, I'm happy to go back on any of these if you have questions. 3.7 is a report that I prepare for you, which just more or less summarizes the cash or the revenue earned as we go. When there was concern expressed about our cash flow and is revenue declining, we started tracking that more carefully. So again, through December, we have a slight excess of fees from the transfer station and a slight deficit from franchise fees, but combined still in that plus. So even though the revenue is not coming in each of those lines the way we anticipated, combined they're keeping us whole. Any questions about that?
Kevin, if we could go back just for a second to 3.5.
Yeah.
There are two charges to Curry Transfer, Roto-Rooter, Curry Transfer, and they're not big money items, $140 and $128 respectively, but
Yeah.
I don't know what KTS service is and GTS service
Oh, I'm
is.
sorry. Too many acronyms.
Okay.
KTS is Klamath Transfer Station,
Oh.
and GTS is Gasky Transfer Station.
That makes sense.
We have porta potties there because there's no plumbing or electricity at those facilities, so.
Okay. I saw Curry and I thought, well, that seems to be out of our jurisdiction, and so I just
Yeah,
was curious.
well, they, in fact, to my knowledge, they own all of the septic collection business in our county and their county. They bought out everybody local.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions on the director's report? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, could you poll the vote, please, to accept the director's report?
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley,
Yes.
and Commissioner Shalom.
Yes, thank you. Moving on to item number 4, landfill post-closure, 4.1, discussion and possible action regarding the recommendation to contract with EBA Engineering to provide services at the Crescent City landfill related to non-water corrective action cost estimates and gas investigations to comply with Assembly Bill 32.
That's a mouthful.
That was a big mouthful.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
I'm going to pass this over to Ted for an overview.
The big mouth. So, yes, exactly as you say, there are two mandated requirements that we need to satisfy at the landfill. And so we released a request for proposal as directed by the board last September, and we received 4 proposals back from Pacific Waste Services, which was the former landfill operations and closure construction contractor, from EBA Engineering of Santa Rosa, from SCS Engineers of Sacramento, and from Lawrence and Associates of Shasta Lake. The EBA proposal was both the lowest price, and they had relevant experience on related projects, and so that is the staff recommendation to accept their proposal. And there's just a slight modification of what you have in your agenda packet. Staff are recommending that the board direct authority staff and legal counsel to complete negotiations with EBA engineers for an agreement to complete the task described in the request for proposals and their proposal for an amount not to exceed $22,715, to authorize appropriate signatures to execute that agreement, and that changes to this scope of work or authorization for additional work under this agreement will require separate additional approval by the authority board of any change orders if such change order would increase the total contract amount by more than $10,000.
Okay, any questions from the board?
Did it make you nervous seeing such a broad proposal amount?
I was going to ask the same thing, and the reason a lot of times you see that, but when you have a company that's actually done work with the landfill before and they're double, it's like they already know what they're working with. So it makes me nervous when a new guy comes in at half the price.
I share that concern, and when I looked into it, they had relevant experience, but part of what's going on, as you probably are aware, is that the economy is still pretty sluggish and coming back slowly, and so there are a number of engineering firms that are pretty hungry for work, and better to have some job than no job at all, and that seems to be the perspective that was reflected in their price. But they do have relevant experience, and the references that I asked about, that I pursued, all gave positive references.
I think it would be worth adding, can you add their understanding or their option that they addressed for the gas testing that could save us money? Because I think that's important.
Yeah, we included in the request for proposals an analysis for the total volume of refuse that's in place at the Crescent City landfill, because there's a number that's in statute, 450,000 cubic yards, that if you have that amount in place, then you're into a different regulatory tier in terms of additional gas investigations. The preliminary analysis that we've done, which admittedly has a fairly significant potential uncertainty, indicated that we're above that amount, but it's close enough that it's probably worth a little bit of additional investigation just in case we might be below that amount, because then that would make the gas investigation much easier. So they do have a proposal to do that investigation and to see whether or not we're above or below that amount. And if we're below that amount, then that'll change the scope of work, and that's part of why we added the additional language regarding change orders, because it's entirely possible that fairly early on into this project, they might offer a change order that could potentially reduce the overall cost or change the scope, because as we'll be discussing, we do have issues at the landfill that may need additional attention.
And I would only if we look at page 9 of 27, there's a very minor change. And I hate to even bring it up, but this is a contract after all.
Right.
It talks about midway in that paragraph having to do with ownership of documents. It talks consultants shall, at its sole expense, provide such reports, plans, studies, documents, and other writings to agency. It should say within 7 days, not with 7 days. Someone might misread it, and it could be a problem. I would imagine it should say within 7 days. In other words, the IN's missing.
Thank you so much
That's
for
all.
finding
Just
that.
a
I'll make
minor
that
thing.
change. And what a thorough read.
Well, I happened to hit it. I don't know how thorough it was.
That's the only page you read.
Yeah. That's the only sentence, actually.
He's a big fan of paragraphs 10.
So, these proposals came in December?
That's correct.
And was there a caveat of expiration, or are we still within the window of acceptance for that?
I believe we're within the window of acceptance. I did call EBA to make sure that the offer was still valid.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Is there any public comment? Okay, seeing none, what's the board's pleasure?
I move that we direct authority staff and legal counsel to complete the negotiations with the EBA engineers and authorize all appropriate signatures and adopt the change to the scope of work.
Hello?
Tommy, take it away.
Sorry.
That's okay. Did you get that?
Can I get a
motion?
second, please?
I just wanted to make it clear that when Ted gave his verbal, we were asking for some authority in addition to what is written down here for change orders up to 10,000.
Okay,
Um,
sorry.
Because
And that was the change in the wording. That's what I was wondering.
That was
It's
it.
that, at the end of that number 3 in the face page where it
Yes,
talks
the
about.
end of number
And-
3, we're suggesting that the last, after what's written there, after change orders, it says, if such change order would increase the total contract amount by more than $10,000. So essentially, if it's a small change order within the
Right.
the approval discretion.
What does the director have approval for?
well, my
Is it 5?
authority is 5,000 by myself and up to 10,000 with the chair. So you could suggest that as a mirror policy. It's just when this was written, it kind of boxed us in because your most recent vote supersedes anything else. And so you can give a specific different direction on this or keep it to the same. And the thinking is that when we get to the next item, we'll be talking about some pretty significant damage at the landfill, and we may, especially if we have savings or if we have a benefit while they're on the site to get some of their advice on those repairs, I'd like to have the flexibility to be able to do that. That's the main reason.
Does the board want that, agree, or?
I agree with that change. I think to bring it back and have them travel back up would not be in the best interest of the authority.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Would you mind amending your motion?
Not at all, that's fine.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, can you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Shalom?
Yes, thank you. And moving on to item number 4.2, discussion and possible action regarding the damage at the landfill.
Well,
Ted? Somebody?
this is mostly a status report, but it's a status report of winter storm damage that's gotten more severe than it has in previous years. Essentially, there's a settling basin on the east side of the landfill that we have never had to excavate before, and this winter we've already had to excavate it twice. I believe what's happened is that although additional analysis is probably warranted, and we're working with the county engineering staff on that, essentially with settlement, the topography of the landfill has changed in a way that's changed the surface drainage. And with the surface drainage, a dramatic increase in the amount of water going over a sandy soil can, when that sandy soil is saturated, cause erosion rills very rapidly. And so that's the circumstance that happened this winter, and those of you who followed this, we've had landslides involving large redwood trees, which have very substantial root structures. And we don't have those same root structures on the landfill property, but we did have the same sort of saturated soil conditions followed by very intense rainfall. And that's what caused the severe erosion issues. But the erosion issues are severe enough that they've undermined both the surface and some of the subsurface drainage structures. So there's significant repairs that we have to do. We have gone out there with the county engineering staff, both the county engineer and Rick Lockstead, to look at the damage. And Jim Barnes suggested that Rick and I go out there after we've had about an inch of rain in a storm, and then it really starts coming down. That's when he wants us to go out in there and look at it to see where the water's going now, so that we can do the designs for the additional drainage structures that would need to be implemented. I do think it's a very prudent move to have the county engineer in the design role, as this is the county's property and the county's landfill. And the additional, if we were to hire an outside engineer to do some of this design work, that can complicate the liability issues. And so we are working with the county engineer, but at this point, because we haven't had that certain storm condition to observe, we don't have a design and we don't have a cost estimate for how much these repairs will be. So that's the status report, essentially giving you a heads up that we will have more repairs to do out at the landfill than we've had to do in any summer prior.
So procedurally, will you come back to us when it rains?
Well, we're working with the county, I'm trusting that the county engineer will come up with a design that we can then implement. When it comes to that expenditure, absolutely we'll be coming back to the board and letting you all know how much it is, how much it's going to be, how much of that is within the budget. If we have to move anything from any budget lines, we'll be involving you in those discussions without a doubt.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think it's prudent to involve the county, so that's a good move. Any other questions from the board? Any public comment? Seeing none, there's no action needed. We will move on. We have no agenda items for the collections franchise, so we'll move on to number 6, transfer station, with 6.1 being discussion and possible action regarding the potential to provide certified weight services at the transfer station to assist local residents and businesses to comply with requirements of the California DMV. And it's my understanding that Mr. Ania asked that this be put on the agenda today based on the possibility of Hambro no longer providing this service at some future date.
Yeah, well, you gave my staff report. Good job. Rich asked to have this put on. We have been aware that there's a time in the future, perhaps before the end of the year, where Hambro stops providing certified weights, and anybody who registers a commercial vehicle has to have a certified weight. And I'm not aware of anybody else, any other private company in the county that provides that at this time. But before we started researching it further, I thought it'd be a good idea to bring it to the board to see if you want us to spend any time on this. It's a little bit outside the scope of what the services that we normally provide, and there will be some costs which presumably we can recover with fees. And I don't think the traffic's so huge, but it is a potential traffic issue because it's more cars coming over the scale that we use for our regular customers. So those are the kinds of issues that we want to research.
So our scale is certified?
Our scale is certified for doing the business that we do, but to provide certified weights, I think we have to have certified weighmasters. So there's some training and there's a permit that we need to get. There's some extra paperwork and some extra fees that we would have to pay. And
so Joel, would you mind just giving us a little background on maybe why you guys aren't going to offer it anymore, and if you think it'd be a good service for the transfer station to take on? If you don't mind.
Yeah, like Kevin said, we are 13, and because we don't have any of the information about when we're no longer going to have that property, or if we're going to continue to have that property. We don't have an answer to whether we can keep providing that service. So it's probably a good idea that someone in the county, the transfer station is a very good candidate to be able to provide those services to the community. My knowledge of the scales and being certified, Kevin's right on, as far as the number of folks that come in daily. Most of the time DMV is 1 or 2, maybe a day. It's not a huge amount of traffic. Probably the issues will come in when big rigs want to be weighed. And that will be a service that the community will no longer have if we don't keep that property open and keep that scale open.
So is the scale that big rigs could be weighed upon something that could be purchased?
Yeah, I'm sure that if that property is sold, that those scales will come up for sale, yes.
Okay. And are any of the workers at the transfer station certified weighmasters?
Currently, they would not be, but it's a relatively easy process for them to become certified.
Okay, great. Any questions from the board?
What did you find, what were you charging for that kind of a weight?
I think for the DMV, it was around $25 a car. And for check weights, I think we were doing $15 a check weight. That'd be where a big rig would come in, simply weigh to make sure they were under their 80,000 pounds.
I see.
And then when we did certified weights, that's when you had to have the weighmaster's license in order to actually, the ticket that you give back to the customer certifies that your scales are certified, that you meet all the requirements, and that the weighmaster also meets those certifications. So.
And if we didn't have this in our community, how far would one have to go to access that kind of a scale?
Brookings or
Brookings?
or Arcata.
Okay.
Won't recognize the Brookings, right? So they would be going south.
Wow. Okay.
It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
One of those things that was kind of overlooked in the community for years and years, just as a service that we were providing. So, big deal. It really is.
Our scale at the transfer station can't take a big rig?
Yes. Yes,
Oh,
they
it
could.
can? Oh, okay.
You have an inbound scale that's a smaller scale, and then the outbound scale is a much larger one.
So it could
accommodate those.
do the check weight and the...
But it's like right up against the...
It's the same scale that we use to measure the Hambro trucks when they're
Big
loading
trucks,
out
Yeah.
export garbage.
Okay,
Same truck, same scale.
okay.
It's set up to do it. I mean, all the facilities are there. I don't think there's anything that we would need to add physically.
Oh,
It's just a question of, whether you think we should do it, because it's kind of a sidestep from what we normally do.
well, I think, some kind of a plan would need to be made about the traffic when big rigs are coming in, but I think it doesn't make sense to not do it.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not asking for a final decision today, just a consensus. If you have it, that we should research this further and come back, because if it's something you want to do, we'll want to give you more hard costs. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it till I got that confirmation from y'all. And then because it's a charge at a government facility, it would require a rate process to set a rate to be able to do it. So we're probably, assuming we have monthly meetings, 4 months before we could have this in service. So when you're faced with the prospect of them not providing the weights at any point in the near future, and certainly by the end of the year, it's probably prudent to start.
I think it's an important activity
Yeah.
for us to do. It's important to this community, and we're a public entity, and I think there's an expectation that the people have that we do what we can when this kind of a need arises. So I would recommend staff go forward.
The direction
Okay.
is there.
I agree.
Is there any public comment besides Joel?
Thank you.
Seeing none, we will move on to, I think we're going to, let's see, where am I? 7.1, discussion and possible action regarding election of officers, chair, vice chair, and secretary for the Solid Waste Management Authority. So, this is an interesting topic because the county has not yet appointed new commissioners. And so according to the advice sought by Kevin of our attorney, it falls back to the commissioners that were prior on this board prior from the county, which would have been Martha McClure and Leslie McNamer. And Leslie obviously is no longer on the board. So thank you for being here today, Martha, so that we could have a quorum. The city has appointed its board members, and Mayor Ania appointed himself and Rick Hawley as our appointed board members, with me being the alternate. Previously, with the 10-member board, the chair was Mr. Hemmingson, and the, I wanted to say Mayor Pro Tem, the vice chair, thank you, was Rich Ania. So Rich would be running this meeting today, however, he had to be out of town. So I'm gonna leave it up to the board's discretion if we want to go ahead and elect officers, knowing that the county still has not appointed board members, nor do I know if they plan on appointing board members or what that means, but I do believe that it will, in the past, the history has been that the chair has rotated between the city and the county, and so the last, I think, 2 years, maybe, well, it got kind of confusing when it went from a 5-member board to a 10-member board. It feels like 2 years. The county was the chair, so theoretically it would be the city's turn. So I'm going to open it up for discussion with this group board.
I would be willing to, I know he's not here, but to ask that Rich Ania be chair, and that as far as a county membership at this time, I would ask that we not do a vice chair appointment in relationship to the county, to defer to the whole board of supervisors.
Thank you. What, is that a motion for Rich Ania to be chair?
Yes.
Okay, I'll second that motion.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Okay, could you please poll the vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
and Commissioner Shalon.
Yes, thank you. And so we will let Rich know that he's the new chairperson, and we will table the item of electing the vice chair and the secretary until our next meeting, which will be announced at a future moment in time.
Yeah.
And with that, yes.
I'd like to just jump in real quickly. I don't see another place on the agenda for me to mention this, but I know that I would like to ask staff to put together a procedure for selecting the public member of this 5-member board. It's not something that we've been addressing yet, but it seems like we're going to need it. And so I don't know about the timing as far as the rest of the commission is concerned, but I think it's important.
Yeah, and just to clarify for the public, you know, the super committee that was formed between the city and the county expired December 31st. It had a sunset date to expire, and the meeting previous to, the 2 meetings, I believe, previous to that were canceled by the former chair. And then I think that there was another one that tried to get put together, but everybody's dates weren't working out. So that super committee of both boards expired December 31st. So with the intention of hoping to have the county appoint new members, and the city has done so. So we're kind of in limbo right now, but we are still in business and need to take care of business, and that's why this meeting today was important. And so if there is going to be a public member, I know that in the past we discussed having the city and the county as a full board approve who that 5th public member would be, yeah. And so I think we could take that we could each take that back to our boards to,
The process is outlined in our most current agreement that we have.
Yeah, I can, I'll prepare a overview of that for the next meeting, a summary of what it says in the JPA. And as I recall, this board would run a process to select somebody, but then it would require annually that the city council and the board of supervisors both agree that that person is the right person. So it adds an additional level of approval, but I think it all starts here. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Does it outline the process with sufficient detail and clarity that you could proceed with advertising and getting applications?
If we were given direction today?
Yes.
Is this your question? Yes.
I don't think we can give direction today because it's not on the agenda.
But I can put it on the next agenda. Right?
Okay. I think we should move as quickly as we can on it.
I hear that.
Thank you.
Got empty seats.
Yeah. Okay. Public comment after that, further discussion? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, we are going to move to item 8.1. This board also acts as the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Authority and discuss and have possible action regarding the approval of a 5-year contract with Northcrest Auto Center for abandoned vehicle abatement towing services.
Ted has a short presentation on this. He's taking minutes.
Okay, so we sent out an RFP to every towing company in the county to provide these abandoned vehicle abatement towing services. And that was... Sorry. Need to learn how to speak closer to it myself. And we received recommendations from the county code enforcement officer and the city police chief, and both of them recommended that we contract with Northcrest Towing. And while they were not the lowest price, that was a unanimous opinion of both Chief Doug Plack and Code Enforcement Officer Mason. And so that is the staff recommendation that the board review the attached proposal from Northcrest Auto and the AVA towing agreement, and authorize authority staff and legal counsel to complete negotiations on this agreement, and authorize appropriate signatures needed to execute the AVA towing agreement with Northcrest Auto. Just as a dose of context, the annual value of the AVA towing contract for fiscal year 11-12 was $18,500. $18,500.
And what was the previous contract for?
It was for the same services.
I know, but was there an annual amount?
That was the annual?
That was the annual amount. There isn't a specified annual amount in these contracts, and so we look back at history.
That's just what the cost was?
Exactly.
The Abandoned Vehicle Authority brings in about somewhere between $22,000 and $24,000 a year from vehicle license fees. Pretty much the entire program is not managed by Solid Waste Authority staff. When the Abandoned Vehicle Authority was approved by the city and the county and the county designated this board because it was existing as the board of the AVA, but it also was specific that the existing city and county staff should be the staff for the AVA. So it's a little bit different when we change hats like this. So we're deferring to the recommendations of the two people that are most involved with the towing and the need for the tow, because we haven't had a contract since December 1st.
Should we acknowledge that we're functioning as the Abandoned Vehicle Authority? Is there any need to make that formal?
I thought Kelly
Did you already do that?
said it. Most formally, you adjourn as
I'm
the
sorry,
Solid
I
Waste
did not
Authority.
adjourn. Should I
and-
do that?
Martha?
And,
Yeah, I think technically that would be appropriate.
well, why didn't you tell me?
You were on a
Could you
roll.
just scratch all that? Okay, I'm going to adjourn as the Solid Waste Authority and reconvene as the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Authority to discuss a 5-year contract with Northcrest Auto for abandoned vehicle abatement towing. And just to summarize, we have been provided with a contract from Northcrest Auto that has been endorsed by the County Code Enforcement Officer and the City Police Chief. And I'm just curious, based on these endorsements, were they provided with all of the towing contractors?
Yeah, we engaged them as much as we could in the preparation of the RFP and review of the contracts. We spent some amount of time. Chief Plack had some very good and relevant comments on the contract and the service standards. So we tried to, even though, as I mentioned earlier, we're not the staff of the AVA, we care a lot about this. So Ted and I moved this process along, but we engaged the County Code Enforcement Officer and the city staff all the way along through the steps.
Okay. And how much more expensive are they than the... Is it in here? I didn't see it.
No.
Yeah, I'd like to have seen a summary of all the contractors and what they were. Thank you.
Thank you.
And because you're asking and while you're looking at the numbers, the primary reason why I think there was a discomfort with going with the cheapest, the lowest cost contractor is that they don't possess the proper land use permit for the services that we're asking for, which involves after abandoned vehicles are towed, they're required to be stored for a period of time until that title gets cleared. So we can't just tow it off the street right to the junkyard. You have to hold on to it and see if somebody claims it. And so there's a requirement under the contract that they have a storage yard and affordable towing. We've checked with the county planning, and they don't have the correct permit.
Oh, sorry for the interruption.
No problem. Meeting is going smooth, plenty of time.
Okay.
So,
So I understand.
Did you understand
They
that? Did
just
you hear that,
seem-
Rick?
Actually, would you repeat it? What happened was I was expecting 2 of these, and I see that it's on the back of...
Yeah, the other one's in there. So you can see what how the numbers compare, but the primary fatal flaw with affordable towing is they don't have the necessary land use permit for the property to store the vehicles, and that's a requirement of the services that when you tow an abandoned vehicle, you have to store it for a while until a certain period of time.
So where do they store the cars that they tow currently?
They have some vehicles stored on their property, but it's a different service that they're providing right now.
Because this is quite a bit difference in cost.
Truly.
I think that in looking at the original plan of the AVA was that the city police and the county code enforcement are the primary drivers of this proposal. And sometimes when you get a RFP, you don't have to go with the lowest one, especially when the necessary rules and requirements of the process of the AVA are different than just towing somebody else's broken down vehicle or a crashed vehicle, that you've received a call. And I think that Northcrest Automotive has that experience under their belt, and that pretty much to me is when I read what the code enforcement officer and the city police had to say, that was pretty much the driving force, was based on experience, based on availability of storage, that they were the best choice, recognizing that we receive about $23,000 a year based on car licensing fees through the DMV, and we're coming in at about $18,000. I think that we're probably fairly safe that we will still hit that same mark. So I would move that we authorize the authority staff and legal counsel to complete the negotiations on this agreement and authorize the signatures needed to execute the AVA towing agreement with North Crest Auto.
I'll second that motion with one quick question. Is there an attempt through this process to get the owners of those abandoned vehicles to pay for anything? What happens? At what point? Is that the code enforcement officer's job to proceed with that?
I think there is an effort to do that.
Okay.
So I had a couple other things I wanted to say. The police chief mentioned in his endorsement that there's been a problem with North Crest Auto in the past responding in a timely manner, and I'm wondering if you approach that subject with them.
We did discuss that with him, and generally he's concerned about officers waiting next to an abandoned vehicle, so he pretty much wants there to be a response immediately. And it's somewhat a give and take, because you can't guarantee that there's going to be someone there ready to respond every single time under all circumstances. Mostly they'll be there, and that is addressed within the agreement. But part of the final negotiations will be making sure that the language works for Chief Doug Plack as well as North Crest Auto.
There were specific terms included in the agreement regarding response time and turnaround time, partially in response to Doug's comments from his previous experiences. So we did attempt to tighten it up and clarify.
Well, I'm uncomfortable approving a contract that is often in many places about 50% more in cost than the lower. But I do understand that there are circumstances, you know, the fact that they don't have the permit from the permit needed in the storage area, I guess is kind of a deal breaker. So that's too bad. So
One more question before we vote. Secondary tow to Curry Transfer in Brookings. Why would we be taking abandoned vehicles to Brookings?
Some of the larger RVs can't be handled necessarily by North Crest Auto, and so that's the circumstance in which
We have
such a
only
tow-
one,
So they sublet.
A1 Auto is the junkyard, and the big vehicles, and buses and RVs are just too big for them to handle, so they have to be towed.
Okay, thank you.
okay, is there any public comment?
For what it's worth, we get a lot of Curry County customers coming to our transfer station. So, you know, the money's coming back.
I hadn't thought of that, okay. I couldn't know.
Is there any public comment? Seeing none, could you please pull the vote?
Sure. Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Shalom?
Yes, thank you. Okay, we are adjourning the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Authority and reconvening as a Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority to convene into closed session. Item 7.2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation pursuant to subdivision C of section 54956.9. Is there any public comment? Do we anticipate any action? No. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.